LAPD officer who is currently under investigation for a use of force incident where he had tackled a man carrying his infant son. Now, this was all during an on-foot pursuit, and it was also captured on body cam footage. Watch here.
I got him. I got him. I got him. Stop! Police! Stop! Turn around. Flip him over? Are you kidding me? I'm trying to take him out.
That was a hell of a situation there. Now, according to police, they were unaware that the man was carrying the baby at the time. And ABC News 7 has details on really what led to this encounter. What they had said is that the incident happened on February 11th near Long Beach Avenue and 55th Street. The pursuit started after police attempted to pull over the suspect, identified as 25-year-old, I believe it should be, or maybe Jose Huerta, for driving erratically. Now, Huerta crashed into a truck and then began to run while carrying his son. During the short chase, the suspect pulled over and began to run from officers. Newly released body cam footage video, which you just saw there, shows at least one officer tackling him to the ground. And you're gonna hear, as you heard, I got him, I got him, I got him. That's what the officer yelled to the other officers as he approached Huerta, who can be seen from behind wearing a hoodie and slowly running along the sidewalk. His baby's pajamas clad legs, essentially they're barely visible as they dangle from his arms. Now here's a still that describes that situation right there of the baby's legs, and you can see them dangling to the side. Now, Huerta, he weighs 270 pounds. This was not a small man. And when he fell with the baby in his embrace, the child immediately let out a cry, which you heard in that video. It's a very, very scary situation, particularly for the health and the safety of this child. And as far as that child's status, this is what we know. The infant was taken to a hospital where he was treated for a small skull fracture, though it's not known if the baby was injured during the crash, the takedown, or something else. The child also happened to test positive for cocaine and fentanyl. He was later released to his mother. All right, so before we kind of dive in more about what the LAPD chief had to say about this, Ben, really what is hitting you here when you hear about this incident with this child?
Yeah, this is just really, really tragic in like a million different ways. But like I mean, there's two layers to it. The first layer is that there's this culture of dehumanization that exists within police departments where as soon as somebody is a suspect, right? Then immediately any sort of human considerations are completely out the window. So the idea that he might be carrying a child isn't even something that pops into this person, like this police officer's head when they're running to like tackle this person. And the next layer to this is just the simple reality that there's a ton of other ways to deal with this, right? Like this is the year 2022. It's not like it's super difficult to find people nowadays. So if somebody does do a hit and run, they're gonna go back home sometime. So you could just tow the car, run the plates, find out where they live, and then show up at the door in the middle of the day with a warrant, and then this situation doesn't happen. And so like it's this sense of urgency and immediacy that police officers feel the need to turn everything into an immediate solution instead of trying to find a peaceful resolution. And like those two factors really combined just lead to the carelessness and recklessness that I think we're seeing in this moment.
Yes, and you made some good points there. Initially, I was thinking, oh, well, if it's that individual's car, but we also generally know that what stolen vehicle reports are, essentially they have a very high rate of being reported because of course people have to claim insurance. So you'd have a good idea if the car was stolen. But in this situation here, we don't fully know exactly what led to that traffic stop other than I think driver maybe driving a little bit erratically. I don't necessarily know, but I do know that LAPD Chief Michael Moore, and here's a photo of him. He announced that there would be an investigation into the unidentified officer's use of force in tackling Huerta. What we also know is that according to the LAPD, the department's Department's Critical Incident Review Division will forward its findings to the chief, who will then make a recommendation to the Civilian Board of Police Commissioners, which will determine if the officer's tactics and use of force were in keeping with the department policy. And as far as Huerta goes, we know that the 25-year-old remains in custody. Here's a picture of him. Now, he's been charged by the DA's office with felony child abuse, evading police, possession of narcotics, and misdemeanor hit and run. This really does have a lot to say about Huerta, to be running with your child, and also to have this child test positive for fentanyl and other drugs. That I see as being a significant issue. He is endangering the life of a child without question by, number one, having those narcotics in the child's system. But then on top of that, to run with your child from police, knowing that you could be tackled, that you could be shot, it really speaks to this individual being a threat to their child's safety. Ben, your thoughts?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's like, in this scenario, there's not really, like obviously the cops were, probably being a little bit reckless in the way they're tackling this person, and this person is being reckless sort of in the way that they're acting, and the way that, ultimately we just have to hope that like the child is in good hands now, fingers crossed. There's, I guess, like a lot to be said about, I guess I don't want to avoid speculating of like how the drugs got in like the child's system. Just because there's obviously like a lot of uncertainty here. And so that I think really just has to go down to like the investigation to figure out how that ended up happening. But no, yeah, the fact that that is there.
Because like generally kids aren't on fentanyl. Like, come on, I cannot see any way but through nefarious means and things that should not have happened. And also if it's a 10-month-old, it's probably in the event that the mother is breastfeeding, it's probably still taking in breast milk. And I know that a number of things could pass through to a child by way of that. So I just think this is an all around problem here, and that kid needs to be cared for a lot better. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, the point you make is like really apt. Like I'm not trying to I don't want to speculate about like obviously the mother situation, but that was kind of like my first thought, is that it was probably through like breastfeeding, which I guess there's another just general issue about like, there being like a shortage of baby formula right now, which is kind of just an aside, but it really just speaks to, like ultimately, I think we've just got a failed system in a litany of ways, right? Police officers could have been more careful. And obviously you've got, a young parents who, I guess I don't know the age of the mother, but you've got a young parent who's in a situation, and wouldn't it be great if we had something that was actually really rehabilitative and was a care-centered approach towards making sure that this child is safe, and then also making sure that the parents are, obviously both safe and like hopefully not using substances like that anymore.
Well, as part of me is like, yeah, I know formula's on the rise, but if you can find money for fentanyl, you could probably find money for that Similac stuff. But also too, I feel for the police officers in this case, because they could have used tasers, they could have used stun gun. No, they saw the individual wasn't moving very quickly, and so they just used their physical body weight to stop them. This is the kind of stuff we want more of. But to have an incident like that where you turn the person over and they're holding a child, that can be very traumatic for an officer, thinking that they couldn't see this and they didn't know it would happen. And as someone who has a number of friends who are in law enforcement or were actually left the business because of the corruption and the chaos, the things I would hear them having experienced, for example, a really good friend of mine who's now working on his doctorate at John Jay. He's a police officer up in the Bronx, and I remember he'd called me and he said, AJ, I just spent hours sitting in the hospital with a 4-year-old who had been raped and holding her hand, and how that changes you as a person when you are dealing with the worst people in our society every day at times. And that doesn't take away that there's a lot of civil rights abuses out there, and there are cops out there who do wrong, but those cops who actually get it right and do right, and then they have to endure the trauma of the aftermath. I think that's something that we should pay attention to.